Hello, this is a brief tutorial on how to set up logic with your TR-8S over USB. So first thing you need to do is install the driver. I'm not going to walk you through that process, but once it's installed within System Preferences, and I'm currently using High Sierra, you will see a preference pane for the TR-8S. So I'm going to click on that. With your TR-8S switched on and connected over USB, you'll know it's working because you will see it listed in this box here. If it's having some sort of connection problem, or it's not switched on, or your computer doesn't see it, or there's a driver problem, you won't see anything listed in this box. So that's the first step. You don't need to make any alterations to the settings in here. Just leave them exactly as they are for default. So that's the first step covered. Next thing you want to do is go into Audio Midi setup. Now, I'm going to assume that you probably want to use your TR-8S in conjunction with an existing audio interface that you have. And in order to do that on the Mac, you need to create what's known as an aggregate device. Now, I've already got one set up here, which you can see, but I'll just step you through the process, which is clicking on this plus icon in the bottom left, create aggregate device. This creates a new blank device, and what I like to do is I like to have my audio interface as the first device within this, and the reason being because I don't always have my TR-8S switched on, and because of that, I don't want my audio input assignments to change depending on whether the TR-8S is on or off. So I like to have my audio interface as being the first device in the aggregate, and I do that by just selecting it from my list of available devices. Your list will be different depending on what you have plugged in and what you have available. So check the box, and that makes this the first audio device in the aggregate. And in my case, I've got 34 inputs and 4 outputs. And to add the TR-8S in to this, I just click on this box here, and now you can see from this top panel my inputs have now gone from 1 to 48, and the color coding in this kind of shaded green, you can see that the first input from my TR-8S is input 35 and goes through to input 48. The TR-8S has 14 inputs and 8 outputs, and the 14 inputs basically are made up of the first 2 being the stereo left and right mix out channel, and then you've got the individual instrument outs, and the final one is the external input. So all of those come over USB. If you prefer to do things differently, if you want your TR-8S to be the first device, it's just a case of unchecking the box and then rechecking it in order. I've now got the TR-8S as being the first 14 inputs seen in my logic inputs. Because I don't always have the TR-8S switched on when I'm working in Logic, I prefer to have my my audio interface first. So let me uncheck that and check it again. to see that it's now at the end of my audio inputs chain. Leave drift correction switched on. This is a means for the Mac to kind of keep both audio devices in sync. So leave that one switched on. And while I'm here, I'll also emphasize that 99% of the problems that you might experience in terms of inputs not showing up correctly within Logic are going to be resolved within here. So I get into the habit of just opening this up for a moment when I first boot up my Mac with the TR-8S on, and just make sure that this is reading 14 ins and 8 outs. If for whatever reason the Mac hasn't fully identified your TR-8S when you've switched it on, you'll sometimes see these figures as being 0 in both cases. It's usually just a case of unchecking the box and then rechecking it, and that usually resolves the issue. If it doesn't, I suggest doing a reboot at that point, but that 99% of the time fixes the issue here. But it is worth checking in here before you open Logic. It just saves a few headaches. Okay, so let me now fire up Logic and show you how I configure things. I'm using the, as of April 2019, I'm using version 10.4.4. So the first thing I will do is I'm going to create a Midi track. I'm not going to use the external instrument plugin. The reason that I'm not is that it's really geared towards bringing in external equipment that just has a single mono or stereo output. It's not really set up for dealing with instruments that have multiple outputs, which is the case with TR-8S. So I'm just going to sidestep using this external instrument plugin. We'll just set up a regular Midi channel. Now, assuming you're using the default Midi channels for the TR-8S, most of the Midi communication goes on channel 10. So I'm going to set that here, and I'm going to create the track. What I also need to do is I need to ensure that I can send Midi clock, and I go into preferences and Midi, and I go into sync, and then Midi sync project settings, and here I'm going to click this on. I'm going to set the destination to be the TR-8S. The list that you will see here will be different depending what equipment you have set up already. So don't worry too much about that. The most important settings are the TR-8S itself or the all setting. All will just send Midi clock out to every device that you have connected via your Midi interface. But for the sake of this, I'm just going to specifically send the clock to the TR-8S, and I'm going to click on the box for auto compensate plugin latency. Can come out here, and if I now hit record, I should start recording the Midi data coming from the currently selected pattern on my TR-8S. So let's just see what happens. And what I'll do is we'll just record in about 8 bars worth of data just for this example. Right, okay, so what we're seeing here is the MIDI pattern data from the currently selected pattern on the TR-8S recorded into Logic. Double click on that, and what you will see may depend on how you've got the notes assigned to each voice within the utility menu. Mine's set to default, with the exception that I've assigned C0 to be the trigger output. So that's just recording just regular 4/4 trigger output pulses. The data up here relates to specific voices on the TR-8S. So that's in, that's good. What I'm going to do at this stage, since I've got this MIDI data in, I will switch off the MIDI clock so that I don't trigger the TR-8S, and instead I just get it to play back from the pattern data, MIDI data that it's already recorded. Go in here, switch that off, and move this down a little bit. When I play this back, you can see the MIDI data is being sent out, although you can't see it just now, but my TR-8S is not playing back because I've switched MIDI clock off. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is create an audio input, and the first audio input I want is the stereo mix out. And from what we saw in the audio MIDI setup earlier, my regular audio interface was channels 1 to 34, so the TR-8S is from channel 35 onwards, and first inputs are the stereo pair, so it's going to be 35 and 36. We'll create that. Now, I happen to know that the way that I've set the kit up in the TR-8S, I'm using individual outs and not stereo outs. So I'm not expecting to see anything on this input at the moment, but I am going to label that, and then I'm going to create an additional audio track, and its first one after that, after the main stereo outs, is the bass drum. In my case it's input 37. Create that, and what I need to do is I need to add a I/O plugin, which allows me to hear what's coming in from the TR-8S. So set that to be input 37 in my case. In your case, you need to set that to the next input after the stereo mix via USB. So my stereo inputs were 35 and 36. So the individual, in this case the bass drum, is going to be on 37. Stop that. Right. I'll just demonstrate that at this point. There's some bass sounds coming through. Okay. In fact, I'll rename that bass drum. Create a new track. This is going to be 38. Same idea again. I/O plugin, mono, This time is going to be 38, and let's just see what happens there. Yeah, we've got a snare coming through there, and it's just a case of adding each one in turn, following the same process. 39 for this one. And again, IO plugin. In my case, it's 40. So let's just rename these. Snare drum, low tom, mid tom, add another one, 41, create that, add the IO plugin, again, next channel along, which is 41 for me, right tom, create another channel, 42 this time for me, again, add the IO plugin, and 42, and name that, which will be Room Shot, and again 43, and add the IO plugin once more, and again set that to match, and after that's going to be hand clap, and add another one which will be 44, and again add the IO, and again set that to 44, and after hand clap we have closed hi-hat, and again this time 45, create IO, and again set this to match the channel 45, so after close hi-hat we have open hi-hat. Can move this out of the way, create another one, channel 46, create, add the IO plugin, and again match up with the channel 46 for me, and after open hi-hat we have CC, almost done, 47, add IO, and next available 47, and rename that. After we've got ride symbol, and finally for me it's 48, again add the IO, set it to match the channel 48, and in this case this is the external input. Okay, so let me just show you what's going on there. So you can see there's audio coming through on most of the channels there. I'm just using the default patch for this, just so you can see what's going on, and the MIDI is being triggered by this pattern here. rather than the TR-8S playing at this point. And if I set input monitoring, okay, right, I'm going to record the audio. Just add that even though there's nothing in there. Okay, and you can see there are beats coming through. Not all of them have beats, but that's just depending on the pattern that you're using at the time. Okay, right. Now that I've recorded these in, what I'm going to do is, in fact, what I'm going to do is just to make this a bit easier to see, I'm going to create a track stack. It's just a way of grouping tracks within Logic. And what I'll do is now for the actual playback and editing, I'll just call this bass drum. If I now drag the recorded audio down here, actually that's the stereo out. So there was nothing recorded on that one anyway. Create a new audio track. Call this bass drum. So this is the bass drum recording that we made. So let me move this down here, and let's ensure that all of these are muted. Play this back. And we've got the bass drum that we recorded over USB before, and it's just a case of repeating this process for each of the sounds that you want to use. This track stack, just to tidy things up, I can hide it out of the way. Let's rename this. Okay, and another trick I can show you is, this is the combined Midi data that came in from the TR-8S. Different MIDI notes there that refer to particular voices on the TR-8S. What we can do is we can right click on that and go to MIDI and separate by note pitch. And what that does is that extracts out all the individual drum parts. So you've got this one here, I recognize as being my trigger. These ones all relate to specific voices on the TR-8S, so you can edit them or assign them to other instruments or samples, or back to the TR-8S as you wish. that's the basics of recording and setting up the TR-8S with Logic. Okay.